Good morning, nerds. Welcome to part two of the Unity Basics, Gameplay Basics series. This is a new series aimed at complete beginners. As before, I am using Unity 2021.1, but it probably won't matter what version of Unity you use. Most of the stuff I've been doing here have been has been working since like the earliest versions of Unity I've been on, and continue to work on the current 2022 versions. Today we'll be using Visual Studio a little bit. Again, any code editor is going to work, but I really like Visual Studio because of the IntelliSense. And today we're going to learn a little bit about movement. As with a lot of things, there are so many ways we can do this. I'm going to show you a couple, but really we're going to focus today on rigid body movement, mostly because it's going to make physics a lot easier. And as we've laid out with this Pong board, really my ultimate goal is that I can get stopped by this wall here. So that's going to be our main goal. I'm going to teach you, also, unlike Pong, I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to do, four directional movement and things like eight directional, well, four directional will open up eight directional movement, but some of those other different movement types. So we're going to just kind of look around at a few different things here. The first thing we need to do is we're really trying to give our object a new behavior that it can do, otherwise known in Unity parlance as a component. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a movement component to our left paddle. Now the movement component doesn't already exist, so we're going to have to create one. And again, there's a lot of different ways we can do this. My least favorite would be to go add component, new script, click through a bunch of things. But if we already know what we want to call it, and I want to call this movement, I'm going to just type in movement here. And the new script button opens up, and actually I can just hit enter and it's just going to go right there, because Unity kind of figures that if you're trying to tell it to add something that doesn't exist, it probably means you're trying to create it. And so I can go over here to movement, and if I just hit enter again, it's going to automatically do create an add. It's going to create a new script, which will show up in my assets window. If I click on the root of my assets window here, if the little spinny wheel of death goes away, I've got my movement here, my movement script, and again, for organizational purposes, I'm going to just create a new folder. We're going to call this guy scripts, and we're going to move this movement script in there because that's where it should be. So now that I've got that in there, there's a couple different ways we can edit our scripts. The easiest two are simply to find them. So like, for example, if I go into my scripts folder, I could double click on movement and that would work. The other option that I have is if you're on the object that needs to be edited, if I go to my movement script, you can see here in the script, it's got this like grayed out, which script is attached. And actually, if you double click on that, it'll open it up. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Mac, for trying to help me. And it's just going to automatically open that up for you. And that's usually, I would say, the most common way that I get into my script editing is just double clicking it like that, because it just seems to be a lot faster. What we're going to do here is we are going to set up some basic scripting, and if you've never coded before, we're going to try to do this really, really, really gently. I'm not going to go into quite as much depth here in explaining things as I usually do with my tutorials, but we'll pick up a few things. So the very, very first thing that we need to do here is in between my movement class and my void start, we are going to add a couple variables, and a variable is just a box in the memory that you can use to hold things and store information. In this case, I'm going to want to be able to adjust my speed inside the Unity game engine. I don't want to have to go back to my code every time I want to make a minor change. So I'm just going to type in public float speed. And we're going to start that off with a default value of 3. If I remember right, that's a little low, but we'll figure it out later. And then I also, since we're going to be needing to do work with the physics engine, we're going to be using physics to move things. We're going to need to connect to the object's rigid body, which it doesn't technically have yet, but we're going to add that in a second. So we're going to go rigid body And it gives us two options here. The one we want is actually Rigidbody 2D. Normal rigid body is great for 3D projects. It's a good default, but since we're doing a 2D project, we're going to stick with the 2D version. We're going to go rigid body 2D, and we're going to call that RB for rigid body. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new vector. Pretty much anything to do with physics or movement or just about anything else in Unity is dealt with through vectors, which is basically a number that can have multiple components. It's very, very similar in look to, like if you did numbers on the coordinate plane when you were in high school, especially in geometry. It's going to look a lot like that, but mathematically it's a little bit different. But that's a good memory model. So we're going to go vector2 move vector. And you're going to notice, for those of you who are newbies at coding, all variables have to be single words. If I put a space in here, it's going to kind of freak out. So I'm doing it like this, and I'm doing camel casing, which is I'm leaving the first letter lowercase, and I'm making my other characters uppercase. It's going to make that more easy to read. If I just did lowercase v, see how it's not as clean to read. Is that mauve a vector? Is that, how am I supposed to pronounce that? But this is pretty clear. It's move vector. So there we go. And then the first thing I need to do is teach Unity how to find its own, teach my object how to find my own rigid body. And we're going to do that by saying, hey, in our start, which runs at the very, very beginning of the program, the very, very first time that object exists, we're going to say, hey, our rigid body is going to be equal to, we're going to use the getComponent method to find a rigid body 2D. And that will look on my component, other things that share, anything in this hierarchy here. It's going to look through this to try to find a rigid body. And you're going to notice right now in Unity we can't see one. We're going to fix that in a minute. So for now this is broken, but we'll fix it in a second. And then an update, what we need to do is give ourselves a movement vector. Now, right now, since I'm trying to basically recreate Pong, I just want my object to be able to move up and down. And there is actually a built-in vector that's going to do this for me, and that is vector2.up. But what I want to do is I actually want to multiply vector2.up. So by my, whatever you're touching on the keyboard. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to say, hey, move vector is equal to vector2.up, which defaults to a vector. If you were going to write it, please don't type this in. I'm just putting it on the screen so you can see it. This coordinates to a vector of 0, 1. And you'll notice that 0 is my x component of my vector, 1 is my up component of my vector, or my y component of my vector, and that's going to be up. I could also do something like vector2.left. Vector2.left would be -1 because that's going left, 0. Right would be 1, 0, etc. But I just want up. So vector2.up. And I'm going to multiply that. I'm going to ask the keyboard what's going on. And the keyboard actually has a built-in thing called an axis, and it's got one called vertical. And that's basically, am I pressing a up or down key? And if I'm pressing up, it's going to give me a 1. If I'm pressing down, it's going to give me a -1, which is perfect for what I'm trying to do here. So we're just going to ask it for that. So that is input.getAxis. And we have to tell it which axis we want. Spelling is crucial here. You're going to notice the quote marks. It needs to be exact, including the capitalization. So that is a capital V and vertical, spelled exactly as I have it on the screen here. And that is going to give me a movement vector that is 0, 1 times whatever this number is. So it might be 1, it might be -1, and if it is -1, what it will do is it'll take 1 and -1, multiply those together, give me -1, which is really going down. So that's going to give me all of my movement really nicely. And I can save this. We're going to save, and I just want to show the incremental progress here. We can save this and run it, but we're going to have a problem. And I do want to teach a little bit of quick console debugging, so we're going to run this. Come on, run. It's going to take a second. Okay, and it should immediately error out. Oh, it didn't. That's a little weird. But as soon as I start trying to hit up and down, you're going to notice that it's not doing anything. I'm a little concerned by the fact that it didn't give me any error messages because it didn't find that rigid body, but there we go. Okay. So it didn't do anything. So let's look at why. What I have done here is I have created. I just want to look at this again. It does have my speed. That is so weird that it didn't error. Okay. Anyways, I do have my speed. You can see it there, which would mean it would be adjustable. But what we've done is we've created a vector. We haven't actually said to move. And now when we're doing when we're doing physics, we don't want to use the Unity update function. Update runs once per frame, but it doesn't always do a great job with things involving physics. So if we're doing physics, and we are going to be using physics to move here, we want to use the fixed update function. So we want to keep our keyboard commands up here in normal update, but we want to keep our physics in fixed update. So I'm just going to start typing in fixed. I'm going to down arrow a couple times there, and I'm going to hit enter on this. I'm going to just let IntelliSense do its job. So I've got private void fixed update. And then what we want to do is we want to alter the velocity of our rigid body. Okay, so our rigid body, think of a rigid body as all of the physics of an object. And we can do a lot of crazy things with it, but one of the things that we can do is change its velocity. So I'm going to go RB, which is our rigid body, dot velocity, and I'm going to set that equal to our movement vector that we just created times our speed. Okay, so if we aren't moving, it's going to give us a 0 here. If we are moving, it's going to give us, whatever our direction is, it's going to multiply that by our speed, and it should allow me to change velocity. So if I save this now, go back into Unity, it's going to compile real fast. And then we're going to go ahead and run this. And you're going to notice it is still not working. Oh, there's my errors. Hey, look at that. That's what I was looking for last time. And it is really freaking out here. It's given me, I'm already at 500 errors. And that's because every frame it's trying to tell me, yo, there is no rigid body on my game object, and you're trying to change it, and that isn't going to work, okay? And so what we need to do is we need to fix that. And this is the error message that I was actually expecting to see last time we ran this, but here it is. So all we've got to do here is in our left paddle, we're going to add another component, and again, we're just going to use the quick typing thing, and we're just going to do rigid body, and again, we want the 2D version, so I'm going to grab rigid body 2D. And we're going to go ahead, and now that it exists, it should be able to find it, and we should be in good shape. So we can go ahead and run that. And I'm not touching the keyboard right now, and you can see that gravity, my object is getting pulled down. And I'm not touching the down arrow, but it's moving down rather slowly, but it's moving down. And I don't really like that. Obviously with Pong I want things to settle, but on the plus side, it did stop when it hit the wall, so I'm kind of happy about that. So the next thing I'm going to do here is we're going to alter some of this. We're going to go, and there is one thing I do want to show you, and that is that if you change the gravity scale, I'm going to change the gravity scale here, but you're going to notice that my Unity is still running. When I stop it, you're going to notice that gravity scale turned itself back to 1 again. And so this is great. You can edit while the game is in flight and change your settings and see what would happen, but it doesn't persist. So you need to keep track of it somehow if you're going to do that. But normally what I try to do is just avoid editing anything while I run. So I've stopped my game. I'm going to change my gravity scale to 0. I'm going to try running again and just see what happens. I just want to keep it from falling. And now my paddle is staying put, which is nice. That's kind of what I wanted to see. So, and if I look at it here, I've clicked on it, and if I look at my Y position, it's not moving at all. Okay, now I'm going to hit my up arrow. Whoops, I need to be clicked on the game window here. I'm going to hit my up arrow, and my paddle is moving up and down. It's not moving as fast as I would like, and it's got this weird, when I let go of it, it's got a little bit of a drag to it, where like if I hold up and let go, letting go, it still continues to coast for a little bit. So we're going to learn how to fix that. But when I slam into a wall, it does seem to be stopping. That's pretty great. So I'm pretty happy with our movement so far, except for that whole drag thing and except for my speed. So while the game is running, what I'm going to do is I'm going to nudge this. 3 was not quite enough, but I don't need a lot more than this. I'm going to go 30 just to see what happens. 30 is way too fast, and it's also causing some pretty weird things to happen when I hit collision. I definitely don't want it to be that fast, so we're going to stop that. I'm going to switch it to 10. Let's see what happens there. Okay, 10 I'm kind of liking, except for that coasting thing that it does, and it does get weird when I hit objects, so we're gonna learn how to fix that next. So we're gonna go ahead and hit stop, and my number, remember that my speed did go back to 3 because it was 3 when I hit run, and all those changes were when I was still running the game. So I'm gonna hit 10. I'm gonna change that. And then we're going to take a look and see what can we do about that weird, like it was bouncing around and getting a little wobbly over here. So I'm going to go into my constraints here, and I'm going to freeze my rotation. So that's not going to allow me to rotate anymore. And I'm hoping that just freezing my rotation is going to keep my other physics stuff in check. So let's go ahead and hit run now. And as soon as the game launches, I'm able to hit. It doesn't look like it's going through. It doesn't look like I'm getting thrown off on the wall anymore. That's all looking pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with how that's going. It is still doing that drag thing. Again, we're going to fix that in a second. Actually, let's talk about ways we could fix that. Okay, so I've got my linear drag here. And if I change this, that would definitely stop the drag, but I want to show you the consequence of that. If I hit 100 here, actually it does slow it down, but it slows it down still pretty slow. And if I turn this number up too big, let's see if we can get ourselves a nice big number there. It eventually makes it so that I can't even move my paddle. Like if you look over here on the right, you'll see that it is moving. But there is so much drag on that object that it is moving really, really, really slow. Think about it like if I took like the fastest runner in the world, but I have an elephant pushing back on him as he's trying to run. Okay, he's not going to go very quick. Maybe he'll make some progress, but it's going to be slow, right? Or if I just put like giant rubber bands on him to hold him back, like he's gonna move forward, but it's gonna be slow. So this isn't good. So we're gonna turn this back down. I'm gonna put it back, or I'm just gonna hit stop because it already it was left at its default value of 0. So that's not a really good option here. What we actually want is, so the problem is actually sneaky on this one. And when I was setting this up in my test practice, I'd actually forgotten about this. So I spent a lot of time trying to remember how to fix this, and it was painfully easy. But it's hidden in a spot you might not think to look. And so the problem here is, the problem that we're having right now is this input.getAxis is asking for keyboard input using the Unity input system. It has an axis mapped called vertical. And what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look and see how that actually works. We're going to unpack that a little bit. So, excuse me. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go to my edit menu. I'm going to go to my project settings. And inside my project settings, and I'm going to be honest, I hate this floaty window. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab the tab and I'm just going to drag it up to the same area as my project in my game, just that way everything's just kind of in the right spot. And I can click between these three things now to see what the thing that I want to see. I'm going to click on the Input Manager tab over here on the left of Project Settings, and you can see this is where you configure the controls. I'm going to pop open my axes. There are 30 built-in things. For now, I would strongly suggest that you just don't mess with any of these unless you know what you're doing. Definitely do not change that number. Scary things happen. But I'm going to go ahead and pop open vertical, and let's take a look. The vertical axis is controlled by the up, down, and S and W keys. And you're going to notice that there's a negative button, which is down, or S, and then there is a positive button and an alt positive. So that means that a down value will trigger -1, an up value will trigger +1, and the same deal with S and W, which will trigger -1 and +1, respectively. The other thing that's going to happen here is we have a thing here called gravity, and it is currently set to 3. What gravity does is it's representing the fact that keyboards and things, you have like the time it takes when the keyboard is unpressed, I guess, like the keyboard's still coming up off the ground, and you have things like controllers, where a controller, for example, if you're using an analog stick, when you let go, it's going to take that fraction of a second to get back to the center when you release it. And that's what this gravity is representing on the keyboard, because a keyboard literally can't sense. It can't sense when it was let go. It just knows on or off, right? So gravity allows it to give a partial value as it's coming off, and so it gradually releases that key. And we just want to make that more immediate. And the easy way to do this is I just throw a bunch of 9s in there, and that's probably too many. Let's go like 5 9s. That's probably good. 6 9s? 6 9s is good. Okay, so we put gravity in there, and we just made that really huge. Dead zone is not going to matter on a keyboard key. Neither is sensitivity, but with a controller, those numbers would matter. We can also invert if we need to, and then the rest of this is just that it's set to a key or mouse button. And if you set it to a key or mouse button, it's ignoring a lot of these settings. Okay, and we can do the exact same thing. We're about to go do some horizontal motion, so we might as well fix this while we're in here. I'm just going to go into horizontal, and I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did. I'm going to change my gravity from 3 to about 5 9s. And what you're going to notice when I go back to my game and click run is that my key release is pretty immediate. When I let go, if we click on my left paddle, we can kind of watch my Y value. Let me try this again. Click into my scene. And when I let go, it just kind of stops, which is good. So there we go. Okay. So that's doing great. My keyboard or my movement is doing exactly what I want. I do get a little bit of a push. You can kind of see it'll overshoot the wall slightly and then pop back in. That's just kind of the physics system working, and it's kind of a problem of using the velocity-based movement instead of using force. But velocity is a lot easier to deal with, so we're just going to keep on doing it. So we'll have some minor visual glitch, but nothing serious. Okay, the next thing I want to do is incorporate horizontal movement. And for Pong, I obviously wouldn't want that, but I want this tutorial to be able to cover a lot of different things. So I'm going to do I'm going to see if we can move this guy horizontally, just so I can kind of move wherever I want to move. And to do that, we're going to go back into our code. And vector2, move vector, let's remember that it also has a horizontal component. Now, right now, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, multiply vector2 dot up times get axis vertical. If we wanted to get weird, I could do this. I could just say right times get axis vertical. I can save this, and it's hard to see on your guys' screens where you are, but if I click, let me try this, come on. There we go. If I hit my up and down keys, whoops, it's still loading. Okay, if I hit my up and down keys, I'm hitting up right now and he's moving to the right, and I'm hitting down, he's moving to the left. And obviously that's a little counterintuitive. That's not what I really want. And I could do something like changing the get axis to horizontal. But I'm going to have a new problem here, and that is if I do this, I'm not going to have any vertical movement. And one of the things that one of my students said, oh, I know how to fix that. How about we do this? I'm going to copy paste, and we're going to do an up here, and we're going to do vertical. And so now I'm doing both. I'm saying, hey, my vector is right times horizontal and up times vertical. And that seems like a pretty logical thing. But if I run it, what we're going to notice pretty quickly here is that my right and left, oh, whoops, hey, it's not loaded yet. Okay, there we go. My right and left are actually not working at all, but my verticals are. And the reason for that, because we need to understand the reasons for things happening, the reasons for that is I'm saying, hey, vector is equal to this here, and then I'm saying it's equal to this instead. So at first I'm saying go left and right, but then I'm saying, no, go top and bottom. And so I basically have changed my mind, and it's ignoring this previous instruction. What I need to do is figure out a way to make it do both. What I really want is my right and left component, or my x component, to be horizontal, and my y component to be vertical. And to do this, we're going to do a slightly different trick. I'm going to just start this off here. We're going to do a different trick entirely. We're going to go move vector equals, and for this, we're going to create a new vector. And our new vector is going to be made up of our horizontal input and our vertical input all at the same time. So we're going to say, hey, new vector 2. And I'm just going to delete this other parentheses here. We'll put it back in a second. And I want it to be equal to this part here, because my x component comes first. I want it to be my input get axis horizontal. So I'm just going to highlight all the space in between here and hit delete. And that's going to put it right where I need it. I'm going to hit a comma. I'm going to put a comma in because I need to separate my y component. And my y component is going to be vertical, so I'm going to pull the exact same trick. I'm going to highlight all this space in between here. I'm just going to delete that. And now my y component is set. And I need to add a second parentheses because this parentheses is one set, but I need to close the entire parentheses set. Drop a semicolon in there. And now I should actually be pretty good. We're going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go back into my game. I'm going to hit play when it lets me. And I am now able to move in all four directions. And actually the really cool thing here is I can actually move in all four directions using either the WASD keys or my arrow keys, and it's working pretty well. So I've got my movement working pretty good. This doesn't allow me to do something like jumping, which I will cover in a later tutorial, but this is letting me do some basic movement here. And this would be good movement for either a Pong style game or a Brick Breaker kind of a game, or even like a tank game if I was doing like a top-down kind of a game. This is going to work. I would definitely want to add some rotation for a tank style game, but this is a pretty good start. So that's it for movement controls. What we've learned today is we've learned how to control our movement using the vector method. We've learned how to add rigid body components. We've learned how to add text components. We've learned how to edit our input settings, which again is in your project settings, edit or I'm sorry, yeah, it is edit. If you're in Unity, edit and project settings. And remember, it's in that input tab. So we've learned how to input or edit our project settings. We've learned how to add a rigid body. We've learned how to disable gravity, which is super important. And we've also learned how to freeze our rotation, which is also important. We learned a little bit about linear drag and why it's generally not a good idea, although there are times where it is. So I think that's a pretty good place to stop for today. Thank you for joining us on this tutorial. This was the movement tutorial, basic movement tutorial. Hope you'll join us for the next one. As always, in closing, keep on creating. Please like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we'll see you for the next one.